Frontiers of Science, a series of information films presented as a public service, documenting the latest developments in medicine and science in the space age.
But look how small this repeater unit is. This smaller, easier to make amplifier was made possible by developing the transistor, a tiny piece of sound amplifying equipment that requires no warm-up time and has an almost indefinite lifespan. Our research people are hard at work finding out what else it may be able to do.
Thanks, 1950s AT&T. Did you catch something interesting in that video? The transistor he pointed to was the size of his fingernail, a few centimeters at least. And yet, in 2016, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab produced a transistor that was only 1 nanometer long. Clearly, maintaining and miniaturizing these electronic components works well for 21st century companies. Their longevity in the industry isn't without its drawbacks, however. Transistors require the generation of energetically costly currents which pass through specific arrangements of semiconducting materials, all while heat energy is dissipated due to internal resistance in the circuit. But what alternatives do we even have? Enter spintronics. Spin transport electronics focuses on the interactions of electron spins rather than encouraging electrons to move from place to place. Consider a line of parallel spins in a ferromagnet, the lowest energy state. Exciting to the next highest energy level sees not the flip of a single spin, but rather the distribution of spin distortions to nearest neighbors. The out-of-sync precession then couples to adjacent ordered electrons, and spin waves propagate down the line. In this way, information is sent through a system without building currents, and most ferromagnetic materials are simple metals. Spintronics could already be the next big thing. Can spin waves do what we need modern electronics to perform? Well, to answer that, we first need a notion of what these devices are doing. Let's see what we can say only with transistors and diodes. At the most basic level, a transistor has 3 pieces, the emitter, base, and collector sections. When a signal is applied to the base of a transistor, then the emitter can pass current to the collector. When the signal to the base is absent, the emitter doesn't move electrons through the switch. Consider the following circuit. All that we've added is a diode, or LED, or something to indicate whether or not current passes through this line. We can associate whether there is or is not current passing through it by 1 or 0. Consider the case that current is sent to the base of the transistor. The emitter is free to pass current to the collector and the diode stays dark, or in the 0 state. Alternatively, the transistor remains closed and the diode lights up. In this configuration, the input to the transistor is the exact opposite of what we read from the LED. If you have any familiarity with mathematical logic, then you may recognize that this table describes a negation. Any input is switched to the opposite output. This negation is called the NOT gate, and is represented more compactly by this symbol. The small circle represents the negation process. What other logical operations are you familiar with? Maybe conjunction? In this case, we would only want a signal if both inputs to some gate were on, or in the 1 state. What would a diagram look like? Add a second transistor and move the diode below both of them. When both are on, the LED is active, and when either or both are off, the LED stays dark. The AND gate is represented like this, and negating this output can proceed either by applying these gates in sequence, or merely by flipping the diode back above both transistors. The result is expressed by adding a small circle and referring to this configuration as the NOT AND or NAND gate. Other names for this process are alternate denial and Sheffer stroke. Most importantly, NAND gates are functionally complete, meaning all possible tables of some desired computation can be built from NAND gates alone. If one could form a spin wave structure to act as a NAND gate, then spin wave logic would also be functionally complete. As it is the foundation of electronic processes, it is clearly able to perform calculations. So how might we accomplish this? This far more complicated circuit is called a full adder. Take a moment to consider how different inputs give distinct outputs. Note that there are 2 output lines called sum and carry. We can leave the S line to read at a diode and connect the C line to another full adder. If we connect 3 of these in a sequence, we can then add together 7 plus 6, represented in binary as 111 and 110. At the rightmost adder, we have 0 and 1, giving 1 as our sum with no carry. Then we have 1 to carry in the second adder, and then 1 to sum and 1 to carry in the final output from the third adder. This gives our answer as 1101, or 13 in base 10. We just talked a great deal about how to build simple electron flows into our own personal calculator, but let's not forget the purpose of this video. There might be less costly, more efficient ways of doing this using spin waves. The goal of the remainder of our discussion is to construct the NAND gate. If that's possible, then in theory we can build back up to our 3-bit adder. So we need a way to generate spin waves, combine them in logical gates, and read the output. Let's focus on generation first. Return to the ferromagnetic line of electrons with the spin distortion. In a particle framework, one would say a magnon was created. The magnon is the spin oscillation equivalent of the phonon, a quantized lattice vibration. Similar to how nuclear magnetic resonance uses microwaves to stimulate spin flips in nuclei caught in strong applied fields, electron spins can also be perturbed with microwaves. Physicists at the Kaiserslautern Technical University in Germany and University of Western Australia in Australia did exactly that by connecting a microstrip antenna emitting microwaves to a yttrium iron garnet slab. The iron is exactly the simple ferromagnetic material alluded to earlier. The rest of the solid is ferrimagnetic and acts as a waveguide for the coherent spin waves being generated. So these distortions, or magnons, propagate through the waveguide and can be mathematically described at each point by some maximum amplitude and the phase of the wave. And if you weren't already there, the mention of phase might be the aha moment on how logic arises. Consider instead two separate waveguides with microwave stimuli acting out of phase. Then, recombining the two waveguides at the end produces two out-of-phase waves that destructively interfere. If one of two waves is phase shifted, then state 1 inputs can lead to state 0 outputs. The final construction is called a Mach-Zehnder interferometer and consists of two slabs of YIG stimulated and probed by microstrip antenna and passing under wire loops. Now, hold on, you say. How is this any better than normal circuitry if we're still using wiring? For now, work with me. I'll come back to that at the end. The most important part of this final device is that both input signals are in phase, and we rely on the wire loops to change the spin wave phase as it passes by. The wire loop has a magnetic field called an Ørsted field, which circulates around the wire. This external field alters the dispersion relation and thereby manipulates the phase. Activating a current in a loop strong enough to move the spin wave phase by pi can then be called state 1. Leaving current off is state 0. This configuration builds an exclusive OR, or XNOR gate. Further work by scientists at Seoul National University proposed that the wire should be placed in between two circular paths of permalloy, nickel and iron. The circulation of the Ørsted field would affect the two arms differently, and again, selecting the right current would shift the two waves out of phase. This configuration would give state 0 when the current is flowing, and state 1 when the wire is unused. This single loop acts as a NOT gate. Lee and Kim at Seoul also then promoted exactly what we needed, a NAND gate, by stitching two of these loops in parallel. Using this setup, a 3-bit adder would require the same number of Mach-Zehnder interferometers as transistors, 54 of them. Okay, I heard your complaints. Aside from being really neat, the presence of wiring and microstrips makes this seem like it's not the revolution you were promised. For right now, yes, and a little no. But back in 2017, Kaiserslautern was at it again when they built a prototype majority gate. This trident-shaped object combines the three input waves to form the output. Consider setting one arm to some phase and calling it state 0. This requires both other inputs to be pi out of phase in state 1 to produce a state 1 output. It's an AND gate. What if one arm was always in state 1? Then only one of the other two needs to be in state 1 to produce a state 1 output. This is an OR gate. Lastly, as these are waves traveling, reading the phase of the wave at a different position will alter the output. If we have an AND majority gate and then read the output 1/2 wavelength further down the film, then the output is flipped, a NAND gate. More interestingly, a full adder can be constructed from only 3 majority gates. So just like that, all magnonic n-bit adders are on the horizon. Yeah, the signal still needs to come from somewhere, likely microwave antenna, but these spin wave logic devices could greatly reduce power loss and time to signal transmission. I think this weird Alexander Graham Bell impersonator said it best about his new invention.
In my view of the future, the novelty will wear off. The instrument will be mined. It will grow light, convenient, and familiar to every hand. A common tool within the means of every factory, business, every home.
Thanks for watching.